In the early hours of January 3rd, 2026, precisely at 2:01 a.m., U.S. helicopters landed in Caracas. Half an hour afterward, Nicolas Maduro was captured, and $17.3 trillion worth of petroleum reserves transferred control. However, Venezuela wasn't the real story. This represented the inevitable next move in a cycle that has decimated empires throughout more than 2 millennia. A cycle so foreseeable, so mathematically guaranteed that once you grasp it, you'll recognize it in everything. Currently, America's national debt reaches $38.5 trillion, increasing by $62 billion daily without exception. Annual interest costs have exceeded $1 trillion for the first time ever. And this year alone, 142,000 millionaires are abandoning established wealth hubs. The biggest voluntary exodus of capital ever documented. This isn't random chance. This represents the fourth phase of a 7-phase progression that has toppled the Dutch guilder, British pound, and Roman denarius throughout history. The Venezuelan intervention isn't where this begins. It's evidence of an empire during its expansion stage, frantically seizing assets to preserve the appearance of strength. The subsequent events are already documented in history books. The real question is whether you will position yourself correctly for the most significant redistribution of wealth in recorded time. Continue watching, because by this presentation's end, you'll know precisely which phase we're experiencing and precisely what follows. Allow me to reveal something that becomes impossible to ignore once recognized. Across the previous 2,000 years, empires ascend and descend following an identical blueprint, identical progression, identical phases, identical conclusion. It's irrelevant whether we're examining Rome in 265 AD, the Netherlands in 1780, Britain in 1931, or the United States in 2026. The blueprint remains unchanged, and it's manifesting at this moment. Here's the mechanism. Phase 1, legitimate monetary foundation. Every empire starts identically. Legitimate currency, authentic worth. Money is supported by tangible commodities, precious metals, hard commodities. This draws economic activity. Commerce channels through the empire. Capital accumulates, manufacturing capacity grows, learning institutions thrive. Creativity explodes. Society becomes affluent through authentic output, not monetary manipulation. This represents the prosperous era. This is when empires establish themselves on solid ground. Phase 2, growth and public spending. After achieving wealth, the empire starts expanding. Not merely military growth, societal growth, construction initiatives, civic works, welfare programs. These initiatives are originally financed by prosperity generated in Phase 1, infrastructure, water systems, medical care, learning systems. Society experiences abundance. The working class expands. Living standards rise throughout all levels. But something subtle is shifting. The empire begins allocating more resources to preserving abundance than generating it. Spending starts exceeding output gradually, barely noticeably. Phase 3, military overreach and currency devaluation. To preserve its worldwide standing, the empire must demonstrate strength. Military power grows expensive, securing commercial routes, sustaining foreign installations, protecting partners, participating in resource-draining conflicts. Expenses climb quicker than income. Taxation rises, but never sufficiently. So the empire takes a critical decision. Rather than reducing expenditures or failing on commitments, it devalues the money. In Rome's era, they reduce silver and coinage. In contemporary periods, they create money. The result is the same. Additional currency pursuing identical quantities of products. Price increases start creeping higher. At first, this appears successful. The empire can meet its expenses. The apparatus keeps operating, but credibility is declining. International currency holders start recognizing. They begin diversifying cautiously initially. Phase 4, frantic asset seizure. This is when things intensify. The empire understands its money is losing legitimacy, so it does what every empire does during this phase. It pursues tangible assets, raw materials, critical supplies, anything with inherent worth. Military actions transform into asset extraction operations. Leadership transitions become about controlling petroleum, ores, vital infrastructure. The empire convinces itself this concerns protection, about liberty, about combating extremism or narcotics. But fundamentally, it's about one objective: obtaining actual assets to support and progressively empty monetary apparatus. This is precisely our current location. Venezuela possesses 303 billion barrels of confirmed petroleum reserves at $57 each. That totals $17.3 trillion. On January 3rd, 2026, America assumed authority of those reserves via a military action that detained the nation's leader. Not coincidental, not anomalous. This is Phase 4 conduct, classic empire mathematics. Now, here's what renders this cycle so destructive. Phase 4 doesn't steady the empire, it's a momentary fix on a structural issue. Because the core problem Expenditure surpassing manufacturing capacity remains unresolved. All Phase 4 accomplishes is purchasing time, typically 5 to 15 years, occasionally less. And while the empire concentrates on foreign asset grabs, domestic issues intensify. Phase 5, eroding trust. This is when ordinary citizens start sensing trouble. Price increases become apparent, not statistical data, real costs it stores. The working class understands their reserves are declining in value. Income doesn't match expenses. Economic disparity expands significantly. Those with tangible assets flourish. Those retaining cash decline. Community unity breaks. Political radicalism increases. Accusations get distributed. Economic conflict intensifies. International authorities begin actively moving away from the empire's money. They don't declare it publicly. They do it methodically. Commercial agreements transition to different currencies. Precious metal stockpiles grow. Reciprocal arrangements circumvent the primary currency. The world currency position, which granted tremendous advantage during previous phases, starts fracturing. Phase 6, monetary imprisonment. Here's where catastrophe strikes. The obligations have expanded so massively that servicing costs devour a huge fraction of governmental income. The monetary authority encounters an unsolvable dilemma. Increase borrowing costs to combat price increases. That renders the obligations unserviceable. Maintain costs low to manage the obligations. That annihilates the money's value. This is termed monetary imprisonment. The administration's obligations are so enormous they control financial strategy. Previous Fed leader Janet Yellen recently cautioned about this on January 5th, 2026. She stated, "The conditions for monetary imprisonment are unmistakably intensifying." Interpretation. We're approaching Phase 6. Phase 7, breakdown and restructuring. The ultimate phase, runaway inflation or payment failure. Money becomes valueless. The apparatus resets. Capital that was maintained in the failing currency disappears. Multi-generation reserves eliminated in weeks. Capital that was maintained in tangible assets, precious metals, fertile land, vital resources, multiplies in worth relative to the failing currency. This is the massive wealth redistribution, from those who believe the apparatus to those who recognize the cycle. Every single occurrence. Now, allow me to demonstrate this with 3 irrefutable historical cases. The Roman Empire. Rome, the perpetual metropolis, the empire that ruled the Mediterranean for approximately 500 years. At its zenith, Rome managed 50,000 miles of infrastructure, constructed water systems that remain operational currently, established a judicial apparatus we still reference. Commerce produced enormous capital. The denarius, Rome's silver currency, was the worldwide reserve money of that period. But observe what transpired. In 64 AD, under Nero, the denarius held 94% silver. Authentic money, authentic worth. But Rome was costly. Military operations, barbarian dangers, an empire covering 3 continents, so they initiated the devaluation, progressively diminishing the silver portion. By 100 AD, it was 85% silver. By 200 AD, 50% silver, then the quickening. By 265 AD, the denarius held merely 0.5% silver. And here's what occurred to costs. They skyrocketed 1,000% throughout the complete empire. Military personnel required increased compensation as the currency became worthless. Emperor Caracalla increased military compensation 50% around 210 AD merely to preserve allegiance. Government expenses soared. Supply chain catastrophes. And Rome had no valuable metals remaining to extract from adversaries. So they did what every empire does. They imposed additional taxation on citizens, runaway inflation, escalating taxation, worthless money. This combination dissolved Rome's commerce. Financial activity imploded. The wealth redistribution was finished. Those possessing land and precious metals endured. Those possessing denarii were eliminated. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire stopped existing. The Dutch Empire advanced to the 17th century. The Netherlands' golden period. The Dutch guilder became humanity's first contemporary reserve money. International trade channeled through Amsterdam. The Dutch East India Company was the most profitable corporation in human chronicle, valued at $7.9 trillion in current figures. Spice commerce, maritime superiority, monetary creativity. The Dutch established the contemporary equity market, but sustaining this empire was expensive. Colonial territories, maritime fleets, commercial route security. By the 1700s, the Netherlands were overextended. They became massively indebted. Domestic conflict emerged between regions, between wealthy and impoverished, between political groups. Their military diminished. Traditional indicators of advanced stage empire. Then arrived the Fourth Anglo-Dutch conflict in 1780. The British, an ascending strength, confronted the Dutch directly. They assaulted Dutch maritime trade, suffocated their commercial routes. Additional rivals like France exploited the situation. The conflict continued until 1784. The British prevailed conclusively both monetarily and militarily. That conflict bankrupted the Netherlands. Indeed, their obligations became unserviceable. Their investment markets imploded. And the guilder, previously the worldwide reserve money, forfeited its position. Capital transferred from Dutch possessors to British possessors, from the declining empire to the ascending one. The cycle repeated flawlessly. Confirmed. Authenticated. Irrefutable. The British Empire. Britain, the empire where daylight never ceased. At its zenith, it managed 25% of Earth's territory. The British pound sterling was humanity's primary reserve money for exceeding 200 years. London was the monetary hub of Earth. British vessels managed international commercial routes, but by 1900, the expenses of sustaining the empire were surpassing the advantages. The Gilded Period generated enormous economic disparities. Britain began borrowing excessively. Alternative nations, Germany, Japan, America, expanded stronger financially and militarily. Then arrived World War I, monetarily catastrophic. Britain borrowed significantly from America to finance the military campaign. By 1918, Britain was an indebted nation for the initial time in generations. They attempted to preserve the pound's worth. They struggled. They intervened. But by 1931, Britain was compelled to relinquish the gold standard. The pound was diminished. Still, they persisted. World War II exhausted additional assets. By 1944, at the Bretton Woods gathering, the outcome was obvious. The American dollar, supported by 2/3 of Earth's precious metal stockpiles, became the fresh worldwide reserve money. But Britain didn't surrender easily. They utilized colonial leverage to delay the shift. Sterling holdings were retained by Commonwealth nations, India, Australia, Ireland, for political motivations, not financial ones. By 1967, another significant devaluation. The pound forfeited 14% of its worth immediately. And here's the critical point. It required over 20 years for the pound to be entirely dethroned. The shift was gradual, agonizing, and catastrophic for British people. Those who retained pound-based holdings observed their capital disappear. Those who had distributed into dollars and tangible assets maintained their buying capacity. The wealth redistribution was finished. 3 empires, separate centuries, separate technologies, separate adversaries, identical cycle, identical phases, identical conclusion. Now, let's implement this cycle to present day, to America, to the Venezuelan intervention, to current events. Let's examine this methodically, phase by phase. No sentiment, exclusively information. America accomplished this in 1944 at Bretton Woods. The dollar was connected to precious metal at $35 each ounce. All alternative currencies were attached to the dollar. America possessed 2/3 of Earth's precious metal stockpiles. This was legitimate money, authentic worth. The basis of American financial supremacy. Confirmed, the basis was authentic. Following World War II, America constructed an unprecedented social safety net, retirement security, senior health care, public health care, interstate infrastructure apparatus, public learning growth. These initiatives were originally financed by authentic financial expansion, industrial supremacy, technological creativity, commercial advantages. The American working class multiplied. Living standards improved significantly throughout all earning brackets. This was authentic abundance financed by authentic output. Confirmed. The growth phase occurred precisely as the cycle forecasts. This is when it began fracturing. The Vietnam conflict, the Cold conflict, weapons competition, military installations in exceeding 80 nations globally. By the late 1960s, alternative nations started converting their dollars for precious metal. They recognized the overextension. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon terminated the precious metal exchange. No additional precious metal support. The dollar became pure fiat money supported by nothing except confidence in the American administration. This was the devaluation instance, the Roman currency reduction, the contemporary adaptation. And what occurred subsequently? Price increases. The 1970s experienced double-digit inflation. The dollar's buying capacity was halved within a decade. But the dollar endured because of one vital development, the petrodollar apparatus. In 1974, America established an arrangement with Saudi Arabia. Petroleum would be valued in dollars internationally. In return, America would supply military security. This generated artificial requirement for dollars. Nations required dollars to purchase petroleum, so they retained dollar stockpiles. This prolonged phase 3 by 50 years, but it didn't remove the cycle. It postponed it. Confirmed. Currency devaluation transpired precisely on timeline. The petrodollar was a momentary solution. Now we're here. This is where Venezuela belongs. Let's examine recent chronicle. Iraq 2003, petroleum stockpiles. Libya 2011, petroleum and precious metal stockpiles. Syria, strategic location, and now Venezuela, 303 billion barrels of petroleum valued at $17.3 trillion at present costs. On January 3, 2026, America executed Operation Absolute Resolve. They detained President Maduro. They assumed authority of Venezuela's administration. President Trump declared explicitly, we're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, and start making money for the country. Interpretation, we're acquiring the petroleum. But here's what's vital to comprehend. This isn't maintainable. It's a momentary action. Venezuela's petroleum infrastructure is demolished. It would require $180 billion across 15 years to restore to maximum manufacturing capacity. Even if accomplished, Venezuela was manufacturing less than 1% of international petroleum availability. This doesn't fundamentally alter America's monetary path. It's a solution, a temporary fix. Phase 4, conduct confirmed. America is actively seeking tangible asset seizure through military methods. Cycle authenticated. This is the phase we're approaching at this moment. Examine the information. In 2025, 142,000 millionaires transferred internationally, the greatest quantity ever documented. Forecasts for 2026, 165,000 millionaires transferring. The biggest voluntary redistribution of private wealth in contemporary chronicle. The UK is forfeiting 168,500 millionaires this year, $66 billion in fluid investable capital. China is forfeiting millionaires. India is forfeiting millionaires. Where are they traveling? The UAE, Singapore, nations with zero earnings taxation, political steadiness, and asset-favorable regulations. This is wealth escape. Affluent persons detecting instability and transferring their holdings to protected territories. Meanwhile, the dollar's portion of international foreign currency stockpiles has diminished from 71% in 2000 to 59% in 2023. Nations are diversifying. China and Russia are finalizing commerce in yuan and rubles. BRICS nations are examining different settlement apparatuses. This isn't breakdown yet. This is preliminary phase 5. The trust is fracturing, not destroyed, confirmed. Eroding trust is quantifiable, quickening and following the historical cycle flawlessly. Here's where it becomes frightening. American national obligations, $38.5 trillion, expanding $62 billion daily. That's $255 million hourly, $42.5 million per minute, $140 per second. Servicing costs in 2026 will surpass $1 trillion for the initial time in Chronicle. That's triple what it was in 2020. By 2035, servicing costs will achieve $1.8 trillion yearly. The Congressional Budget Office forecasts obligations will achieve 156% of GDP by 2055 under existing legislation. Under different situations, if existing taxation reductions are rendered permanent, obligations could achieve 220% of GDP. And here's the critical element. Previous Fed leader Janet Yellen recently cautioned on January 5, 2026, that the conditions for monetary imprisonment are unmistakably intensifying. She stated if financiers forfeit confidence that America will restore to operating advantages, they'll require increased borrowing costs and increased costs on $38.5 trillion of obligations. Disastrous. The Federal Reserve is cornered. Increased costs to combat price increases. Obligations become unserviceable. Maintain costs low. Money forfeits buying capacity. This is monetary imprisonment. The obligations are so enormous they manage financial strategy. Confirmed. America is approaching phase 6. The mathematics is irrefutable. We're not here yet, but the cycle states this is approaching. Chronicle provides us a duration. Once monetary imprisonment establishes, the breakdown phase typically requires 5 to 25 years. Some financial experts, like Kinteres from Penn Wharton Budget Apparatus, forecast the breaking threshold around 2050. Others believe it could transpire sooner if trust breaks abruptly. A forfeiture of reserve money position, unsuccessful bond offering, a national obligation emergency. The ultimate phase always includes either runaway inflation or payment failure. There is no third alternative. And when it transpires, the wealth redistribution is finished. Those retaining money get eliminated. Those retaining tangible assets endure. We're not there yet. But every measure is indicating in that trajectory. The cycle is manifesting phase by phase precisely as Chronicle forecasts. Allow me to be completely transparent about something. I'm not forecasting the future. I'm demonstrating a cycle that has replicated itself for 2,000 years throughout every significant empire in documented Chronicle. Rome, the Netherlands, Britain, all followed the identical 7 phases. All concluded the identical method. And America is presently in phase 4, approaching phase 5, with phase 6 starting to materialize. This isn't perspective. This is quantifiable information following a historical cycle. Now, here's what individuals always state when presented with this cycle, but this occasion is unique. They state technology will rescue us. Artificial intelligence output, creativity, American superiority. Allow me to confront this directly. Actuality. The Roman Empire possessed revolutionary technology for its period, building material, water systems, sophisticated construction. The British Empire possessed the mechanical revolution, the greatest technological advancement in human chronicle. Technology didn't rescue either empire because the issue isn't output. It's the connection between expenditure and income. When expenditure consistently surpasses income by enormous amounts, 6 to 7% of GDP yearly, no quantity of output expansion resolves that. America would require maintained 5 to 6% GDP expansion for generations. That hasn't transpired and won't transpire. Actuality, the British pound was the reserve money for 200 years. It failed. Reserve money position doesn't prevent deterioration. It postpones it and renders the ultimate collapse more catastrophic because when reserve currencies break down, they transport the complete international monetary apparatus with them momentarily. Actuality, yes, technically accurate. America can create unlimited dollars. But creating money to settle obligations is runaway inflation. That's not rescuing the apparatus. That's annihilating it differently. Question Weimar Germany. Question Zimbabwe. Question Venezuela. Creating money doesn't generate capital. It redistributes capital from possessors of the money to those who create it initially. This occasion isn't unique. The cycle is definite. If the cycle persists, and it consistently has, we're heading toward a wealth redistribution of historic dimensions. Not tomorrow, not next month, but within the subsequent 10 to 25 years. Those who comprehend this will arrange accordingly. Those who don't will observe their reserves disappear. Here's what Chronicle communicates about endurance approaches. Every empire that imploded in Chronicle compensated those possessing tangible holdings, precious metals, fertile land, vital assets. When Rome imploded, those possessing land endured. When the Dutch guilder failed, those possessing precious metals maintained capital. When the British pound was diminished, those who had distributed into dollars and tangible assets sustained buying capacity. The cycle is transparent. Tangible assets maintain worth through monetary shifts. Specialized capabilities maintain worth regardless of money. If you can supply critical functions, medical care, construction, agriculture, specialized occupations, you sustain earning ability. During Argentina's multiple currency emergencies, those with sought-after capabilities adjusted. Those dependent on fixed earnings or reserves were eliminated. 142,000 millionaires are transferring this year. They comprehend something most individuals don't. When an empire approaches advanced phase deterioration, wealth restrictions often follow. Capital taxation, departure taxation, holding seizure, having alternatives, secondary locations, international accounts, global business frameworks, supplies, security. This isn't about being disloyal. This is about acknowledging historical cycles and responding logically. The dollar will probably remain primary for years, potentially generations, but its buying capacity will decline. Possessing multiple currencies, particularly those of lender nations or commodity-supported apparatuses, supplies protection alternatives, China's yuan, Swiss franc, precious metal-supported tools, these won't prevent forfeiture, but they diminish concentration danger. Here's the most frequent error individuals commit when shown this data. They do nothing. They receive the examination, comprehend the cycle, observe the information, and then persist as if nothing has altered. This is normality prejudice. It won't transpire in my existence. Someone will resolve it. The administration won't permit it to become that severe. Chronicle demonstrates otherwise every occasion. The Roman people didn't believe their empire would collapse either. The British didn't believe the pound would forfeit reserve position. It transpired anyway because the mathematical powers behind empire breakdown don't care about beliefs. The January 3rd action in Venezuela isn't the origin of the wealth redistribution. It's evidence of where we are in the progression. When empires approach phase 4, they begin seizing tangible assets, petroleum, precious metals, vital assets. This is desperation camouflaged as power. It's a momentary action that purchases time but doesn't resolve fundamental issues. The reality that America felt obligated to execute a military action to obtain petroleum stockpiles, valued at $17.3 trillion, communicates everything about the monetary circumstance. If the apparatus were steady, this wouldn't be essential. If the dollar were truly protected, asset seizure through power wouldn't be transpiring. This is advanced phase empire conduct. This is the cycle confirming itself. Based on historical precedent, here's the probable progression. In the subsequent 2 to 5 years, rising wealth exodus, climbing price increases, money instability, expanding community conflicts. In the subsequent 5 to 10 years, potential forfeiture of reserve money position or substantial deterioration of dollar supremacy, heightened wealth restrictions, feasible national obligation emergency in the subsequent 10 to 25 years, significant monetary restructuring, either runaway inflation or payment failure, complete reorganization of the international monetary apparatus. This isn't a prediction, it's a historical cycle. The duration could be briefer if trust breaks abruptly. It could be extended if the apparatus is maintained extended than anticipated. But the trajectory is transparent. The cycle is irrefutable. So what do you do with this data? First, inform yourself. Comprehend Monetary Chronicle. Examine empire progressions. Observe the measures I've described. Second, distribute your capital. Don't possess 100% of your holdings in any individual money, nation, or apparatus. Third, obtain capabilities that maintain worth in financial shifts. Become essential. Fourth, construct connections. Groups endure emergency better than persons. Fifth, arrange a fraction of your capital in tangible assets, not gambling. Tactical distribution based on historical maintenance cycles. And finally, remain educated. The cycle is manifesting in actual time. The Venezuelan intervention is one information point. Observe for the subsequent actions: additional asset seizure, climbing price increases, wealth restrictions, community instability. These aren't arbitrary occurrences. They're phases in a foreseeable progression. We're experiencing one of the most substantial wealth redistributions in human chronicle. Most individuals won't recognize it until it's too late. They'll believe the apparatus, trust in American superiority, and presume things will succeed. Chronicle states they won't, not without intense suffering initially. You have a selection. Comprehend the cycle and arrange accordingly, or disregard it and hope this occasion is unique. But remember, this occasion is never unique. The cycle is definite. The wealth redistribution is approaching. The only question is which position of it you'll be on.